Ukrainian cities over the past few days. It's just over a week since the Kerch Strait Bridge connecting Crimea to Russia was struck by an explosion, almost certainly caused by Ukraine. There is a theory, which is not conspiracy, that there's a Russian munitions truck exploded, and the Russians found it less embarrassing to blame that on the foe than admit they screwed up. But these things happen. If you're moving tons of munitions around, even the best armor would have the occasional explosion. The timing of it is suspicious. It happened to occur exactly as that fuel train was passing. Anyway, back to this. There have been Russian losses sustained in their own territory. The attack on Belgorod, near there, some draftees being trained, 26 of them shot, 11 died, 50 survived. Some of the wounded may yet succumb to their wounds. Now, Russia claims they shot dead the two assailants, claim they came from a Commonwealth of Independent States country, without naming which one. The Commonwealth of Independent States are Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. That's it. Is that 8 I counted, or 9? Anyway, so the obvious answer would be a Ukrainian. And why haven't they named which country these people come from? I mean, they may well be lying. The Russian government often tells the most blatant lies. But there have been various civilian facilities blown up in Belarus, not in Belarus, in Belgorod region as well. That's a Russian region adjacent to the Ukrainian frontier. So as a sign of increasing desperation, they're lashing out at Ukraine with various missiles. Some of these kamikaze drones, they can hover, see a target, go for it, but that blows them up. Some of these Shahed missiles they're purchasing from Iran, Shahed meaning martyr. So they've killed roughly 20 Ukrainian civilians in these strikes. The Ukrainian claims have shot down about half of these incoming incendiaries, probably an exaggeration again, but certainly they are shooting down some of them. So the Russians are so short of equipment and components, they're purchasing from Iran. There was talk of buying shells from North Korea, which are supposedly compatible with Soviet-era manufacturers of artillery pieces. But Western countries should have lifted sanctions on Iran ages ago. I've advocated that for other reasons, but that might be a way of incentivizing the Iranians. If you cut off these supplies to Russia, we will lift sanctions, at least some sanctions. It's got to be some carrot, not all stick. So hitting the civilian infrastructure, bad though it is, yes, it murders civilians, but it doesn't degrade the military capability unless they're people who are somehow related to the war effort, like railway staff. But the Russians have hit heating facilities as winter is coming on. So they're going to is terror tactics to freeze the civilian population into submission. Is the idea. Now, obviously, millions of Ukrainian civilians have left the country, but still the majority of them are there, and some of them are needed for the war effort. They're not actually soldiers, but they're indirectly helping the war effort. So Ukraine could hit back in a like manner, but so far they're not doing so. And I've always thought that NATO should give longer range missiles, like Tomahawk missiles, to the Russians. The Russians are doing absolutely everything they can. There is no ethical limit. We know this. There's been mass murder committed by the Russian armed forces, many large-scale massacres of civilians, deliberately killing civilians, knowing them to be civilians, rounding them up and shooting them dead when you know they're no threat whatsoever, as well as tens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians who've been abducted and taken against their will into Russia, which is explicitly prohibited by international law, by the Geneva Convention, to which Russia is a signatory, which indeed it has ratified decades ago. This shows that they are sort of running out of options. Often talk about what cards Russia got left to play. It's been throwing draftees into the conflict. It's been confirmed the first people drafted since the 21st of September have some of the first of those who have been killed in combat already. Some of them with little or no training. There's inadequate equipment. They turn up to barracks for their training. There might be no beds for them, no food for them, no officers for them. Now, sometimes there's one or two of these things, but not everything, because so many officers are fighting and being killed. Remember, the NCOs have almost no initiative in the Russian army, can pass on orders up and down, but can't actually initiate things. So it's all going really badly, having to put out crowdfunding for equipment. Various Russian cities, including St. Petersburg, have cancelled their New Year celebrations. The money that they would have expended on that will be for providing soldiers with winter clothing. All the basics there haven't been provided for. There's massive corruption. There's a kleptocracy. because of the huge scale defalcation, the Russian soldiers don't have the basic equipment they need, the boots or whatever. They'll have bits and pieces of uniforms, but not an entire uniform. So it's all going pretty badly. Nevertheless, numbers matter. Between the two September drafts, there's a total of 460,000 troops. Of the 300,000, Russia claims to have got 220,000 now. I'm sure that is a lie. They will have got something, but not quite as high as that. But even if they will get the whole 460,000, of course, they can't equip them. They cannot supply them. Their commissariat was breaking down, trying to supply only 200,000 soldiers. And the Ukrainians had not been very smart. They could have done much more to ruin Russian transport, hit their logistics deep inside Russia, blowing up bridges and tunnels. I've been saying this for months. So there's a mounting public anger about how ill prepared the soldiers are, the lack of readiness of the military, the way this draft system was allowed to atrophy under Putin. And he will deflect blame. It's everybody's fault except that of the commander-in-chief. He never accepts responsibility. Why, he's such a coward. He's utterly invertebrate. He's totally irresponsible. I mean, morality and criminality to his side, and all he's got to do with these psychological abilities, but all for all sorts of reasons, he's completely unworthy of the office that he holds. Admittedly, he does have low cunning, and he did achieve some positive results for Russia in the early years, particularly in the economic sphere. So Russia's increasingly paranoid. They started arresting people for cooperating with a foreign state. Notice that that's not espionage, cooperating with a foreign state. But all states cooperate with each other. We should cooperate with each other, really, even states that are hostile to some extent. And Estonia has just declared Russia a terrorist state today. Obviously, it's not looking good for Russia. They're being pushed back, but there are some sectors where they're moving forward. The Ukrainian offensive has slowed. That's partly because they've sustained serious losses. Westerners are sometimes over-optimistic and don't like to face up to the fact that their Ukrainian friends are suffering badly as well. So they can't sustain this for much longer. There's only so much troops can take. They need a bit of R&R themselves. Might be low on ammunition and all sorts. And the new equipment from Western countries is just not fast enough. It's supposed to be provided in months in some cases. They've asked for the German Leopard tanks. They're not getting them. So Russia's obviously increasingly diplomatically isolated. There's not been a vociferous support from any country in their position beside Belarus, okay, North Korea, Nicaragua, Eritrea. Everyone else has occasionally voted their way in the United Nations. Did I miss one? Venezuela, but even Cuba hasn't voted their way. China's abstained. India's abstained. The Central Asian countries have all abstained, have been out of the room at the United Nations vote on this thing. A United Nations envoy a few days ago stated that Russia's been using rape on a large scale as part of its military strategy to break the will of the Ukrainians to resist. Trouble is that might really backfire and harden their will to resist, knowing that if we don't repel the invader, then our women shall be violated, maybe men too. So the Russian public is suffering from this, but it's not crushing. Already diabetics are suffering from shortages. There's a disruption of supply chains. The price is going up, and it shows just how dependent Russia is on imports from Western countries of all sorts of things. So, as we're spreading Russian influence, there's this de-Russification policy which is accelerating in Ukraine. Been there for on a small scale, but it only really sped up. It only really got zealous once Russia aggressed them. They were actually very cordial until Putin came along. So it's gone obviously very badly for Russia. They already had 10% of Ukraine before February this year. They got up to about 20% of Ukraine. They've been pushed back to controlling about 15% of Ukraine. They may be pushed back further. But I think there's a limit to how far this Ukrainian offensive can go. In about a month, it'll grind to the halt because the weather will be too cold. Obviously, there will be some fighting over the winter. It'll be mainly bombardment, but there won't be rapid movement back and forth. Anyway, are the Western weapons made in China? Not so far as I know, because then there wouldn't be Western weapons. I think one of the few things China will not send to Western countries is weapons. Incidentally, I read how some ex-British pilots, as in Royal Air Force pilots, are in China training Chinese military pilots on military aircraft, and they're paid £240,000 a year, which is far, far more than they make in the RAF, even at the peak of their career. That's quite worrying. And then the United Kingdom perhaps ban them from do so, or say, you'll be charged with a crime if you do so. But it's not illegal right now, so far as I know. They're often guys in their 50s, very experienced pilots. Right. So there's growing public anger in Russia, but it's just not enough to pose a significant threat to Putin at the moment. There's a long way from it. So the strategy is really not working out. Looks like he's not going to break Western countries this winter their will over fuel prices. It's going to hurt, but not so much to do so. Well, Duras, I mean, China is a hostile state, obviously spying on Western countries quite a lot, threatening to invade Taiwan. All right, we recognize that's part of China, kidnapping people abroad and things like that. Bullying abroad is a vicious, totalitarian, oppressive system. So, giving them access to how to use the latest military planes would not be a good idea. All right, thank you. Goodbye.